Welcome back, everybody, to another Danielle Phantom review. Today we are talking about the Season 2 finale, Kindred Spirits. Let's get into it. It's the Danielle Phantom clone saga today. So very briefly, the plot of this episode. This girl named Danielle comes over to see Danny. She says that she's his cousin. And then it turns out that she's actually a clone of Danny, created by Vlad, based off Danny's DNA. We find out that Vlad's been doing a bunch of experiments trying to create a clone of Danny for himself because he wants a family. Again, one of the things I really like about Vlad as a character is he actually has very human motivations. He just goes about trying to achieve his goals in very messed up ways. So Danielle Phantom is a female clone of Danny. That's right, she's essentially exactly X-23 from the X-Men. Danielle Phantom is obviously very similar to Spider-Man, and we got a clone saga in that as well, but this story is much more influenced from X-23s and Wolverine, which is fun, and I think it totally works here. I'm all for it. One of the things that's cool about this episode is it's actually very dark. Vlad's trying to create a clone of Danny, and so he has all these like failed clones that exist, and he sends some of them to come after Danny, and they're all like these weird messed up versions of Danny, and Vlad's having trouble getting Danny's DNA mid-transformation. These clones kind of like slowly destabilize and turn into goop, and like there's a few shots of them like fucking melting and being destroyed, and it's like actually kind of dark because one, they look like Danny, so it's like Danny's fucking dying. Two, I think at one point they like say that these clones are mindless, but they don't know, like they think they're alive and they just like fucking melt. It's pretty brutal. The other thing that's kind of fun about these clones is Vlad sends a few after Danny to try to capture him because he needs more samples of his DNA. There's like a big one that's all weird, and there's a little one, and then there's like another one. Wait, is that the ghost from Ghost House?
Ooh, nice to see you.
But this story really reminds me of this arc from the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, where it's the first big story that Shredder comes back, and there's all these like weird Shredder clones that are in like these tubes, and one of them's a big one, and one of them's a little one, and one of them's weird. They did this arc a couple times in some of the shows as well. Very similar here. I don't know, I find that interesting. Some other cool details in this episode. Early on, we see a couple clips of Valerie, so at least I remember that she exists in this one. She doesn't get any lines or anything, but we established that part of the reason Vlad has been sending Valerie to attack Danny is because he's getting her to record data and information about Danny so that he can perfect his weird clones. We also are introduced to this AI that Vlad has created that like runs his lab and stuff, that's based on Maddie, like Danny's mom. And it's really weird and creepy, but again, kind of leaning into the idea that Vlad is he just wants to have a family. He's just trying to accomplish that goal in a really weird and creepy way. And then at the end of the episode, the Maddie program ends up rebelling and leaving Vlad for the Jack program, which apparently existed. It's nice because it ties in thematically with Danielle eventually rebelling against Vlad, realizing that he's a weird creep who doesn't actually care about her, and is just using her to get to Danny to try to create a more perfect clone. So it all thematically works. Vlad's weird knockoff recreations of these characters that he's trying to control, even those end up rebelling against him, kind of showing that like you can't just control people. All of that I think is like kind of thematically interesting for Vlad's character, just kind of showing that he's going about trying to create a family in just the wrong way, and it doesn't work. Just a couple other little details that I like. Danny and Danielle are looking over some of Danny's like space program stuff, because this episode also remembers that Danny wants to be an astronaut, and Danielle also has that interest because she's a clone of him. And one of the posters that Danny has like a Hartman space probe or whatever, obviously a reference to Butch Hartman, the creator of the show. So that's a fun Easter egg. We also learned that Vlad has at some point taken over control of Microsoft by possessing Bill Gates, which I think is hilarious. The boomerang comes back in this one, which is a nice attention to continuity. Yeah, this episode is fun and cool and has a new interesting dynamic with Danielle. She's a little bit more rebellious than Danny. Vlad is kind of like her father figure because he created her and stuff. And at first she's working with him against Danny, but then eventually turns on Vlad and joins Danny's side. She has this cool, fun, like, Kim Possible looking belly shirt design, which I think is really fun and very 2000s, but totally works for the show. At the end of the episode, she has this moment where she kind of leaves, but then she's like, oh, I'll be around and you'll see me again, kind of thing. And then she appears in literally one more episode of the show before it gets canceled. And that's not any fault of this episode. They introduce a new character that's fun and interesting and can shake up the character dynamics and stuff. And it's like at the end of season 2, so this feels like another like, okay, this is another like big shift in status quo. Danielle's going to become a bigger part of the show going forward, and we're going to explore those dynamics a lot more. And then season 3 happens, and they barely address it until one episode at almost the very end of the show. Just one of the things that's kind of frustrating about season 3, which we will get to, but just that there's a lot of interesting ideas that have been set up and established that don't really get to pay off or play out as much as they could. Like, way back earlier in this season, they had set up that Vlad had made some kind of deal with the Fright Night, and now the season's over and we haven't seen what that was. And I don't think it ever comes back again. This is a solid episode. There's a new character introduced that plays with the already established soap opera dynamics between Danny and Vlad. How he wants to create a family, but does about it in a really creepy and dark and weird way. Danielle learning that her father figure is weird and creepy and abusive, and her learning that she doesn't have to put up with that. All these cool and interesting soap opera family dynamics that really make this show interesting. And we get to have a new character that's cool and interesting, and it's just literally X-23, but X-23 is cool, so I'm not really going to complain. And yeah, I wish that they had done more with her. That's essentially this episode and the end of season 2. This finale doesn't exactly wrap up anything specific from this season, not that there was specifically any overarching stuff that much anyways. Weirdly, we don't see Jazz this episode. I just realized that. That's kind of strange. Yeah, I feel like she should be in this one. Yeah, this episode feels more like it's setting up stuff for a new big status quo shift kind of thing. And then season 3 really doesn't deliver that at all. I remember this episode feeling like a really big deal when I first saw it on TV as a kid, because I'm like, oh shit, there's like a clone of Danny and he's having this huge battle with Vlad and stuff. This feels like late Danny Phantom. But then there's like a whole other season of stuff that like is almost entirely inconsequential before the show remembers Danielle or wraps everything up. But that's basically it for this one. A really solid episode. Great to see Vlad again. Cool new ideas being introduced, even though they don't do as much with them going forward as I wish that they'd had. But yeah, this is about it, and that's the end of... We're done. Season 2. We did all the episodes. Here's my completely arbitrary rating of all the episodes. And we will see you next time where we start season 3. I might end up taking a little bit of a break because season 3 is going to be a little bit of a challenge to get through, but we will do it, and we will see you next time when we start season 3. Danny Phantom.